There comes a moment when something inside you quietly shatters. Not with noise, not with chaos, but with a stillness so profound it echoes louder than any scream. You look around and suddenly realize you can't go back, not because the door is locked, but because you've outgrown the room entirely. Life hasn't just changed, you have. And there's no undoing it. It starts in the smallest ways. A conversation that once comforted you now feels empty. The things that once excited you now leave you hollow. You're no longer able to pretend that the old way fits. It's like trying to wear a skin that no longer belongs to you. Without warning, you find yourself shedding everything familiar. Beliefs, routines, relationships, even parts of your identity. Not because you want to, but because you can't carry them forward anymore. There's no guidebook for this. No map. No clear signs. Just a quiet, aching truth rising from the depths of your being. This isn't who you are anymore. And the life that matched that old self no longer satisfies the one you're becoming. You start to feel like you're walking between worlds. One foot in the past, the other inching into something unknown. And that in-between space, it's disorienting, but it's also sacred. It means you're waking up. You're no longer willing to live on autopilot or accept shallow versions of connection, meaning, or self-worth. It doesn't matter how far you try to retreat into old patterns. They feel foreign now. The comfort they once gave you has turned into restlessness. Your soul is speaking louder than ever. It's not asking you to be better. It's demanding that you be real. Everything that doesn't resonate starts to fall away, and you don't even have to force it. Your energy begins doing the work for you. You walk into rooms and feel the misalignment before a word is spoken. You sense the heaviness of conversations that no longer nourish you. You're not just thinking differently, you're vibrating differently, and that shift reaches into every corner of your life. There's grief in this awakening. Grief for who you were, for what you thought would always matter. But there's also a kind of quiet power rising through the cracks, a clarity that doesn't scream, but it's undeniable. You don't chase truth now. You live it. You don't beg for peace, you embody it. And that version of you that once needed validation, permission, applause, they begin to fade, like a ghost gently released from your chest. You're not lost. You're just not the same. That discomfort you feel? It's the friction of rebirth. And though it hurts, it's also the most honest thing you've ever known. Because what's dying isn't you, it's the illusion. And what's being born is your truest self. Raw, awakened, and finally free. There comes a shift so quiet, so intimate that only the soul can truly witness it. It's the kind of change that doesn't announce itself with thunder, but moves through you like a whisper carried by wind. And once it arrives, nothing inside you remains untouched. Your heart begins to stretch open, not from pain, but from truth. A deeper knowing that defies explanation. You start to feel something ancient awaken inside you. Not something new, but something that has always been there waiting. It's not logic that guides you now. It's not reason or the maps you've followed before. It's something far more profound. A kind of inner vision that sees with the heart and hears with the soul. And that kind of awareness, once stirred, cannot be silenced. It expands within you like breath after drowning, and it keeps moving, rearranging the way you understand yourself, your relationships, and your place in the world. This change isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It simply becomes the air you breathe. You no longer chase meaning, you embody it. You're no longer satisfied with the half-truths you once accepted. What you value shifts. What you tolerate dissolves. You begin to make decisions that reflect the voice inside you that once was buried beneath noise. And even when difficulty returns, because it will, you don't run from it anymore. You face it with new eyes because something inside you refuses to return to sleep. There's no ceremony when this awakening happens, no finish line, just an undeniable sense that the life you lived before no longer fits. And from that moment on, the journey becomes less about reaching and more about becoming. You find yourself drawn to what aligns with your essence. People, places, conversations, they begin to reflect the clarity blooming within you. The rest begins to fade, not out of anger, but out of peace. Your energy sharpens, not in aggression, but in precision. It becomes clear, calm, and grounded in something real. The outer world slowly begins to mirror the inner one, and you notice things begin to shift without force. Your frequency has changed, and so the world around you responds. Not because you're chasing it, but because you're finally aligned with it. This isn't a final destination. It's a return to your origin, a sacred remembering. Every experience, every wound, every joy becomes part of the mosaic. Shadow and light no longer battle. They dance. You begin to trust the unfolding even when you don't understand it. The need to control everything softens, replaced by the deep faith that you're exactly where you're meant to be. What once felt like an identity crumbles, but you don't grieve it like before. Because now, you understand, nothing true is ever lost. Only the masks fall away, only the noise fades. What's left is essence, pure, unwavering, and whole. There's a power in the surrender, a quiet courage, and it changes everything. You no longer cling to who you were because who you're becoming feels more honest, more alive. Even the pain transforms, not into something to avoid, but into something sacred, something that shapes you gently instead of breaking you. You begin to live each day with presence, not pressure. You listen more, you speak less. You choose stillness where there was once noise. The world hasn't changed. You have. And in that transformation, you discover the doorway was never outside of you. It was always within. This isn't just a crossing, it's a becoming, a soul no longer fragmented, a life no longer borrowed, a truth no longer silenced. And the beauty of it all is that you didn't have to chase it. You just had to answer when it called. There's a kind of beginning that doesn't start with a choice, but with a truth. The kind of truth that rises like quietly and settles in your bones before your mind can make sense of it. It's the moment your life stops being a series of reactions and starts becoming an act of creation. Every breath feels more intentional. Every thought feels like a thread weaving something real. And suddenly you're no longer just surviving. You're becoming. This isn't something you planned. It's something your soul has been leading you toward all along. Transformation no longer feels like an idea or a goal. It becomes a living force that moves through you, carving away everything that's false until only your essence remains. And in that stripping away, you begin to feel something deeper take root, a stillness that holds more power than chaos ever could. You notice it in the quiet, in the way your body no longer clenches before speaking your truth, in the soft yet certain voice inside that begins to speak louder than your fears. Not with grand revelations, but with a calm knowing that feels ancient, as if the universe itself is murmuring through you. That voice doesn't argue, it doesn't shout, it simply knows. And for the first time, you trust it more than the noise around you. The world hasn't gotten easier. The chaos hasn't stopped. But something inside you has shifted. You're not looking for safety in the outside anymore, you're building it within. That clarity you feel, it's not luck, it's not coincidence. It's the signal that you've touched a part of yourself that cannot be shaken. A deeper wisdom has awakened, one that doesn't depend on facts or logic, but on resonance, on energy, on truth. You begin to make choices that make no sense to anyone but feel like home in your soul. And that's how you know you're walking your true path. I mean, there's no longer a battle between the head and the heart. They start to speak the same language. Your decisions come from alignment, not fear. And even when fear does show up, it no longer paralyzes you. You see it, you breathe through it, and then you move anyway. This is the sacred shift Carl Jung spoke of. When the unconscious steps into the light, not to disrupt your life, but to complete it. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more you than you've ever allowed yourself to be. And with that shift comes a new way of seeing. Patterns reveal themselves. Messages show up in the most unexpected places. Life begins to speak with you, not at you. And the more you listen, the clearer the conversation becomes. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop outsourcing your power. The need for approval fades, not because you don't care, but because your compass now points inward. Intuition becomes your anchor in uncertainty, your guide when everything else feels blurred. It doesn't always make the path easier, but it always makes it true. And that truth becomes enough. You begin to walk with more grace. You forgive yourself faster. You say no without guilt and yes without fear. And slowly, the life that once felt fragmented starts to come together. Not perfectly, but honestly, wholly, authentically. That voice inside, the one you used to ignore, it becomes your most loyal companion, a voice that doesn't lead you away from the world, but deeper into it, into the parts that matter, into the parts that last. And when you look back, you won't remember the exact moment the shift happened. You'll just know you're no longer who you were. And you won't want to be. Because what you found in its place is something far more real, a clarity that doesn't just comfort, it liberates. A knowing that doesn't just guide, it grounds. And a connection to yourself so true it makes even the darkest moments feel like part of the light. There comes a moment when your inner voice stops whispering and starts becoming the ground you walk on. It doesn't need to convince you anymore. You just know. You know that something real has shifted, something permanent. The way you listen has changed. The way you respond to the world has changed. And the way you move through life now feels like it's being orchestrated by something far deeper than thought. It's not just clarity, it's alignment. You begin to feel as if every part of you, of a mind, body, heart, and soul, is finally working together, flowing toward the singular truth. That scattered feeling you once lived with starts to dissolve. You no longer have to choose between logic and feeling, instinct and reason, because something larger has taken its place. Coherence. Every choice you make now echoes with something sacred, a harmony that wasn't there before. And even when doubt creeps in, it doesn't control you like it used to, because there's a deeper trust living beneath it. That inner voice you once brushed off has become your guide. Not a distant force, but a presence you carry inside your chest. A quiet certainty that doesn't just help you avoid what's wrong, but draws you toward what's right. Not by society's standards, but by your soul's. You begin to feel it guiding you in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. A nudge here, a pause there, a moment of peace before a choice that once would have created the anxiety. That's the real proof that the threshold you've crossed is not imagined. It's embodied. You're no longer lost in your head. You begin to listen with your whole being. You start to see things you never noticed before. Not just patterns in the world, but patterns within yourself. And these aren't just coincidences. They're messages, mirrors, confirmations. Archetypal energies rise from within. Not as distant mythologies, but as living wisdom moving through you, revealing parts of yourself you didn't know were there. These aren't ideas. They're experiences. They shape your choices. They elevate your perception. And they anchor your journey in something timeless. You're not just growing, you're remembering. And in that remembering, you stop needing proof from the outside. You stop asking others to validate your direction. You know where you're going, even if you can't explain how. Or that's what real trust feels like. It's soft, it's grounded, and it's unshakable. The world starts to reflect your transformation. The noise gets quieter, the urgency fades. You no longer need to chase. You no longer grasp. And it's not because you've given up. It's because you've let go. And in that release, something new takes shape. Peace. Not the peace that comes from things going your way, but the kind that exists even when they don't. You feel yourself stepping back. Not in distance, but in perspective. You begin to witness life rather than trying to grip it. The people, the beliefs, the roles that once held you tightly now begin to soften. You don't resent them, you just outgrow them. And that outgrowing isn't angry, it's gentle, it's compassionate. You simply know what no longer fits, and you no longer force yourself to squeeze into it. This isn't detachment born of coldness. It's warmth in its most mature form, a love that allows, a presence that accepts, a wisdom that sees the impermanence in all things and chooses to love anyway, without clinging, without trying to control. It's the kind of detachment that sets you free, not from life, but into it, fully, authentically, freely. You stop needing life to look a certain way. You start trusting its rhythm, its timing, its flow. Even in the unknown, you begin to feel safe. Even in uncertainty, you feel held, because now you're not standing on shifting ground. You're standing in your truth, and from that place, nothing and no one can take your peace. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't come from having more. It comes from needing less. A freedom that arrives the moment you stop gripping the world with desperate hands and start trusting that you are held, even when nothing is certain. It's in that release, that quiet surrender, where everything begins to shift. Not because the world changes, but because you do. The noise begins to fade, the weight lifts, and what's left is clarity, space, peace. Carl Jung knew this transformation well. He understood that true growth requires the courage to let go, not to lose, but to make room. Room for the soul to breathe, room for energy to rise, and consciousness to expand. And when you begin to live from that space of surrender, everything begins to align. You're no longer reacting to life. You're dancing with it. The intensity that once ruled your heart starts to soften. The stories you once clung to fall away like leaves in autumn. And in their place, you find something infinitely more powerful. Presence. That presence becomes your foundation. It carries you when logic fails. It guides you through uncertainty. You start seeing things not as you wish they were, but as they are. And somehow, that truth feels more beautiful than any illusion ever could. You stop needing to control what comes next. You stop chasing. You simply trust. Not blindly, but deeply. From the kind of knowing that lives in your bones. The more you release, the lighter you become. And in that lightness, your spirit begins to shine in ways it never could when burdened by fear and expectation or control. You begin attracting people and experiences that feel like truth. Not because you're seeking them, but because you're finally aligned with what you were always meant to receive. The anxiety that once colored your choices fades into calm. The tension that once filled your chest loosens into breath. And suddenly life doesn't feel like something you have to wrestle with. It feels like something that flows through you. This is the gift of detachment, not numbness, not indifference, but a sacred intimacy with the present moment, free from the need to force or possess. You watch with soft eyes. You love without cages. You speak without fear. And in that space, life begins to meet you where you are, because you're no longer pretending to be anywhere else. Your relationships begin to shift. You no longer hold on to people out of habit or fear. You allow them to be who they are, and you allow yourself to walk away when something no longer resonates, not with resentment, but with grace, because you finally understand that letting go is not the end. It's the beginning of a deeper connection to what is meant for you. And what's meant for you now must meet the vibration you've stepped into, one of openness, of authenticity, of wholeness. You no longer waste energy trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. You stop begging for clarity from places that only offers confusion. Instead, you listen inward. You follow the wisdom that has been waiting for you to be still. It leads you gently, steadily, with a strength that needs no explanation. This transformation doesn't announce itself in a single moment. It happens slowly, like a tide rising within you, a subtle shift in how you see, how you feel, how you are. And in that shift, something sacred takes hold. Self-acceptance. You stop judging the path you took. You stop regretting the turns. You begin to see it all, and the pain, the joy, the detours, as necessary steps toward this version of you, the one who trusts, the one who releases, the one who is finally free. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the journey to becoming whole, and you're living it now, not in theory, but in the way your heart beats softer, in the way your presence holds space, in the way you no longer chase love, but become it. You live now with a quieter kind of strength, a strength that doesn't need to prove anything, a love that doesn't need a grip, a peace that doesn't rely on perfection. You understand now. Everything comes exactly when it's meant to, and everything that leaves is creating space for what your soul truly needs. This is the threshold. This is the crossing, and this is what it feels like to walk forward, not in fear, but in trust, not in desperation, but in alignment. You're no longer trying to hold the world together. You're letting it unfold, and finally letting yourself unfold with it. There's a shift that comes so quietly it doesn't announce itself with fanfare, yet once it happens, you realize your entire reality has changed. You no longer live by the ticking of clocks or the rigid maps others handed you. Time softens. Reality deepens. You begin to feel as though you've stepped into something infinite, a space where past, present, and future are not separate chapters, but one living story unfolding all at once. And in that story, you begin to hear the voice of the universe, whispering not in words, but in meaning. Each moment starts to glow, not because the world outside is different, but because you are. You've crossed into a new way of seeing, where ordinary events shimmer with sacred resonance, and life no longer feels like a linear race, but a spiraling journey inward and outward at once. This isn't imagination. This is perception expanded. This is consciousness awakened. It's the recognition that nothing is random. Every face, every heartbreak, every delay, every joy, all of it is woven into something bigger than you could have once understood. Carl Jung called it the luminous experience, a meeting with the sacred that opens the psyche to a truth beyond what the eye can see. You start to sense symbols where there used to be noise. You begin to feel patterns where once you only saw chaos. What used to feel like coincidence now feels like guidance, as if reality is speaking directly to you in a language only your soul can translate. And you begin to slow down, not out of laziness or fatigue, but reverence. You stop rushing through your life. You stop measuring your worth by how fast you move or how much you accomplish. Instead, you begin to honor the rhythm of your own becoming. You trust that things will bloom when they are meant to. You no longer force the petals open. This shift doesn't mean life becomes easier. It means it becomes clearer. You feel the presence of something deeper moving beneath everything. In conversations, in silence, in moments that seem too small to matter, until they change everything. You begin to live with more presence because you no longer see moments as disposable. Every breath feels like a part of something eternal. Every choice, a thread in the great tapestry. And in this spaciousness, a new kind of freedom takes root. One not bound by deadlines or expectations. You're not just existing anymore, you're participating in something divine, a dance between the seen and the unseen, a co-creation with the forces that shape stars and storms and souls. You walk differently now, with more grace, more wonder, more trust in the unfolding that once terrified you. The fears that once dictated your path begin to dissolve, not because you've conquered them, but because you've transcended the illusion that they were ever in control. You see now that the pain had purpose, the delays had design, the losses cleared space, nothing was wasted, nothing was for nothing. And as this awareness deepens, you stop resisting. You stop needing certainty. You stop arguing with the mystery, because now you feel it. The sacred order, the intelligence beneath the chaos, the love beneath the loss. You realize that life is always speaking, not with noise, but with presence, with synchronicity, with meaning that can only be heard when the mind is quiet and the heart is open. You begin to live not just in time, but with it, as a companion, as a current you trust to carry you exactly where you're meant to be. The boundaries of past and future begin to blur, and what matters most is what's here. Now this moment, this breath, this lesson, this love, you look around and everything is still what it was, and yet everything has changed, because you are seeing through new eyes, the eyes of someone who has crossed a threshold they cannot return from, the eyes of someone who knows that every thread matters, that every soul you meet is a mirror, that every experience is sacred. This isn't just a different way of thinking, it's a different way of being, and it stays with you in the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you choose to move through your days, not hurried, not afraid, but rooted, open, alive in the dance of what was, what is, and what will be, all unfolding now, in the eternal present your soul has finally come home to. There comes a point when the ordinary begins to feel extraordinary, not because life outside has changed, but because something deep within you has awakened. You start to see the sacred in what you once overlooked, in the way the light hits the wall, in a stranger's passing glance, in the silence between your thoughts. Every breath becomes part of something much bigger, and in that realization, peace finds you. Not the kind you chase, but the kind that rises when you stop resisting what is. This peace isn't fragile, it doesn't shatter with circumstance. It flows from a quiet trust in the unseen rhythm guiding your life, a trust that doesn't need to know what's next to feel grounded in what's now. Carl Jung called this meeting with the luminous a crucial step in the journey toward wholeness, because it's here, in this expanded state of awareness, that you begin to feel your soul woven into something eternal, a living field of meaning, a deep intelligence beneath the surface of everything. Duality softens. The conflict between this or that, right or wrong, success or failure, begins to dissolve. You no longer feel pulled in opposing directions. You no longer fight with yourself to prove or protect or perform. Instead, you rise into a space of integration, where the fragmented pieces of who you've been slowly begin to return home to one another. There's a stillness in that reunion, a power in that simplicity, and something profound shifts in how you live your days. You no longer separate the spiritual from the mundane. The sacred isn't reserved for rare moments. Look, it pulses through everything, washing dishes, walking to work, listening, not just with your ears, but with your whole presence. Life becomes your teacher. Each moment becomes your practice. And your awareness becomes the altar where it all unfolds. You feel time stretch, breathe, soften, What once felt linear now feels circular, layered with meaning, filled with echoes. You begin to see how your past shaped your readiness, how your future is already calling, and how the only real place you can meet either is in the fullness of this breath, this moment, this now. From here, you start to vibrate differently. It's not something you force, it's something you are, a presence that resonates more deeply, more clearly. And because you've changed, what life brings to you begins to change too, not as a reward, but as a reflection of your energy, your truth, your alignment. People enter your orbit who mirror your depth. Experiences find you that accelerate your growth. Synchronicities appear so often they no longer feel like coincidence. They feel like conversation, a living dialogue between you and the divine. Your intuition sharpens, not as guesswork, but as guidance, a knowing that moves through your body, your breath, your instinct. You feel led, not by logic alone, but by something deeper, something sacred. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, not becoming someone else, but becoming more fully yourself, the real you, the whole you, the soul beneath the roles. And in this wholeness, a new purpose begins to emerge, not as a job title or a mission statement, but as a living current. You don't chase it, you become it. Every step you take begins to feel guided, even when you can't see the full path. You no longer follow what the world says you should do. You no longer wear a mask to be accepted. You choose what resonates. You move with what's true. You stop asking, what should I be doing? And start listening to what you were born to do. And it may not be loud. It may not be grand. But it will be real. And in that reality, you will find a kind of fulfillment that no external achievement can offer. Because it's not coming from outside you. It's rising from within. This is when you know you've crossed the fifth threshold. You're no longer pulled by the gravity of other people's expectations. You are moved by the gravity of your own soul. And it's not a weight. It's a compass, a quiet force guiding you into alignment, into presence, into purpose, and a calling that doesn't ask for perfection, only honesty. You've stepped into a life that feels like home, not because everything is easy, but because you are finally here, present, whole, awake, ready to meet the world, not as a role you're performing, but as a soul you're becoming. And from this space, every step becomes sacred. Every choice becomes intentional. Every breath becomes a return to who you truly are. You reach a moment when something ancient within you finally speaks clearly. A voice not shaped by the world, but carved from the core of your being. And when you hear it, you can't unhear it. It becomes the pulse beneath everything. You stop chasing approval. You stop bending to fit into spaces that never truly saw you. You begin moving with purpose. Not the kind that's loud or performative, but the kind that burns slow and deep, like fire that knows exactly what it's meant to consume. That fire doesn't demand attention, it commands alignment. And in its heat, all the masks begin to fall. You stop living by inherited definitions of success. You stop performing roles handed to you by culture, family, or fear. Instead, you begin honoring something more sacred, your truth. Every decision starts flowing from the clarity of that truth. Every action reflects the power of that alignment, and suddenly life isn't something you're surviving. It's something you're shaping, from the inside out. Carl Jung called this individuation the path of becoming undivided, the slow, sacred unraveling of everything false so the real self can rise, untamed, unapologetic, and whole. And when this awakening takes hold, it no longer matters whether the world understands you, because you understand you. And that understanding carries peace, not the peace of quiet circumstances, but the peace of inner coherence. The kind that says, I know who I am, and I will not betray that. You start to walk differently, with more conviction, more softness, more strength, not because life gets easier, but because you are no longer negotiating with your soul. You no longer abandon yourself to belong. You no longer trade your truth for safety. You belong to yourself now. And that changes everything. Purpose becomes your compass, not as a fixed goal, but as a living current guiding your evolution. You may not always know what the next step is, but you feel the direction. And that feeling is enough, because now you trust it. You trust you. And that trust fuels a new kind of courage. The courage to say no to what drains you, to say yes to what sets your spirit on fire, even if no one else understands why. This alignment affects more than just your life. It radiates. It shifts the energy around you. People feel it. The clarity in your eyes, the groundedness in your words, the stillness in your presence. Your transformation then becomes permission. It becomes a silent invitation for others to remember who they are. Not by force, not by preaching, but by embodiment. You become a mirror that reflects what is possible when someone decides to live awake. Even when the path gets hard, and it will, you'll keep moving because the alternative is no longer an option. You've crossed a threshold. You can't return to the version of you that betrayed your soul to be liked, accepted, or safe. That version is gone, buried, and in its place stands someone real, someone dangerous to every system built in fear, someone who knows they were born for more than survival. This is the gift of crossing an irreversible spiritual threshold. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about living each moment as if your soul chose it, because it did. It's about walking with a heart on fire and eyes that see the sacred in everything, even the shadows, especially the shadows, because you now know light isn't something you chase. It's something you become when you stop running from the dark. And if you made it this far, you already know this isn't just another video. This is a mirror, a challenge, a call. If it stirred something in you, don't treat it like background noise. Let it brand your soul. Let it be the moment you stop looking back. If you're one of the rare ones, the ones who are ready to bury the domesticated self, the performative self, the broken self, then the space was made for you. Subscribe. Turn on the bell. Don't miss what's coming. And if you want me to know you're not just passing through, drop this in the comments. Silence is my armor. Consciousness is my sword. That's how I'll know you stayed. That you're not here to be entertained. You're here to become